The text arrived at 8:47 p.m. while I was reviewing architectural plans for my latest development project. I set down my coffee and read my brother Ryan's message twice, feeling the familiar knot of frustration that came with every family interaction. Julia, we need to talk about Mom's living situation. Since Dad died, she can't stay in that big house alone. Sarah and I have decided she's moving in with us. Your studio apartment is too embarrassing to even consider. Mom deserves better than that cramped space you call home. I looked around my 600-square-foot studio in the converted warehouse district, the same neighborhood that 10 years ago had been considered too dangerous by my family, but had since become the most sought-after area in the city. The exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor made it one of the most coveted units in the building. But to Ryan, it was just proof of my continued failure to achieve what he considered real success. I typed back, "You're absolutely right. Mom should have the best possible living situation." My phone buzzed immediately with his response. "Finally, some sense from you. Sarah's already converting the guest room. Mom will be much happier with us in Riverside Towers." Riverside Towers. Ryan's pride and joy, the luxury high-rise where he and his wife Sarah had purchased a penthouse 3 years ago, stretching their finances to the absolute limit to afford the monthly payments. Ryan never missed an opportunity to mention his prestigious address and the building's exclusive amenities. What Ryan didn't know was that I owned Riverside Towers, along with 12 other residential and commercial properties throughout the city. I picked up my phone and called Marcus Chin, my property manager. "Marcus, it's Julia. I need you to prepare an eviction notice for Unit 3204 at Riverside Towers. The Williams unit." Ryan Williams. That's right. May I ask the reason? I scrolled through the thick file of documents Marcus had been compiling for months. Multiple lease violations. Unauthorized modifications to the unit, exceeding the occupancy limit, and unpaid pet fees. The pet fees. They've had a dog for 8 months without declaring it or paying the required deposit. The neighbors have been complaining about noise and messes in the hallway. I see. And the occupancy limit. The lease specifies a maximum of 2 adults. Adding a third permanent resident violates the agreement. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Julia, are you sure about this? Your brother doesn't know you own the building, does he?" "No, he doesn't. And after tonight's conversation, I think it's time he learned about consequences." "What should I cite as grounds for eviction?" "All of it. The unauthorized pet, the lease modifications they made to the bathroom without permission, and the upcoming occupancy violation. Give them 30 days. Understood. The notice will be delivered tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I walked to my windows and looked out at the city I'd spent the last decade quietly acquiring piece by piece. The harbor sparkled with lights from the restaurants and shops I owned in the converted waterfront district. The office building where Ryan worked as a mid-level marketing manager was visible in the distance. Another property in my portfolio. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "By the way, you should probably start looking for a bigger place soon. A woman your age living in a studio apartment isn't a good look. Maybe something in a family-friendly neighborhood? Sarah knows a realtor who specializes in affordable housing." I typed back, "I'll keep that in mind." Ryan's response came quickly. "Good. It's time you started making better choices with your life. You can't keep pretending that this artsy downtown lifestyle is sustainable forever." The irony was rich. Ryan, who worked in marketing for a tech company that leased space in one of my buildings, was giving me career advice. Ryan, who was leveraged to his eyeballs on a luxury apartment he could barely afford, was counseling me about financial responsibility. I poured another cup of coffee and returned to my architectural plans. Tomorrow would be interesting. At 7:15 a.m., my phone started ringing. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. "Julia, what the hell is going on?" "Good morning to you too, Ryan. What's wrong?" "What's wrong? I just got served with an eviction notice. They're saying I violated my lease and have 30 days to vacate the premises." "That sounds serious. What did you violate?" "That's just it, I don't understand any of this. They're claiming I made unauthorized modifications, exceeded occupancy limits, and failed to register a pet." I took a sip of coffee. "Did you do those things?" "Well, we installed that new rainfall shower head in the master bathroom. And we've had Max for a while now, but he's just a small dog. And Mom isn't even moving in until next week. So you did violate the lease terms. Julia, these are technicalities. Normal people don't get evicted over shower heads and small dogs. Normal people get permission before making modifications and declare their pets when they get them. Whose side are you on here? I'm on the side of following the rules you agreed to when you signed the lease. This is Julia. Could you show a little family solidarity? My wife is hysterical, my mother-in-law is asking questions, and I'm about to lose the most prestigious address I've ever had. The prestigious address comment almost made me laugh. Ryan, have you tried talking to the property management company? Of course I tried. I called first thing this morning. They said the decision came from the owner and that there's no appeal process for multiple lease violations. The owner? Yeah, apparently Riverside Towers is owned by some investment company. Carson Holdings or something. Chin Holdings, I corrected automatically. Whatever. The point is, it's some faceless corporation that doesn't care about tenants. They probably want to jack up the rent and needed an excuse to get rid of current residents. If only he knew. Ryan, what are you going to do? I don't know. We can't afford anywhere else in this neighborhood. And with Mom needing to move in. God, Julia, this is a nightmare. Maybe you should have thought about that before making unauthorized changes to someone else's property. Are you seriously lecturing me right now? Julia, I make 3 times what you make. I live in a luxury building. I drive a BMW. I'm successful by any reasonable measure. And yet you're being evicted. This is temporary. This is just bureaucratic bullshit that I'll figure out. Okay. Don't say, okay, in that condescending tone. You live in a converted warehouse studio and drive a Honda. You don't get to be condescending about my housing situation. I looked around my studio, the same space where I'd built a real estate empire worth over $200 million. You're right, Ryan. I shouldn't be condescending. Thank you. Now, can you help me figure this out? Do you know anyone in property management or real estate who might have connections? The question was so loaded with irony that I had to set down my coffee. Actually, I might know someone who could help. Really? Who? Let me make some calls and get back to you. Julia, this is serious. If you have connections that could help, I need you to use them. My entire reputation is at stake here. I understand. Let me see what I can do. After hanging up, I called Marcus again. The eviction notice was delivered? This morning at 7 a.m. Your brother called our office about 15 minutes later. What did he say? He demanded to speak with the owner. When I told him that wasn't possible, he asked for the property management supervisor. I told him I am the property management supervisor. And he asked if there was any way to work out a payment plan or compromise. He seems to think this is about money. What did you tell him? I told him that lease violations aren't financial issues. I also mentioned that the owner has a strict policy about tenant compliance. How did he respond? He asked if the owner might be willing to meet in person to discuss the situation. I smiled. And what did you say to that? I said I'd check with ownership and get back to him. Perfect. Schedule a meeting for this afternoon. Conference room at the Riverside Towers Management Office. Should I tell him who he's meeting with? No. Just tell him the owner will see him at 2 p.m. That afternoon, I arrived at the Riverside Towers Management Office wearing my most conservative business suit and carrying a leather portfolio filled with Ryan's lease violations, payment history and correspondence. The building's management office was located on the ground floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lobby I'd designed when I purchased and renovated the property. Marcus met me in the hallway. Your brother arrived 10 minutes early. He's in conference room B with his wife. How do they seem? Nervous. His wife brought a folder of documents. I think they're preparing to make their case. Let's not keep them waiting. I entered the conference room to find Ryan and Sarah sitting at the polished table, both dressed formally and looking anxious. Ryan was wearing his best suit, the one he'd bought for job interviews, and Sarah had her hair pulled back in a style that screamed, trying to look professional. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I said, taking the seat across from them. I'm Julia Chin, owner of Riverside Towers. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's mouth fell open. Sarah looked from me to Ryan and back again, clearly confused. Julia, Ryan said finally. What are you doing here? I'm here to discuss your lease violations and eviction notice. But you said your name was Julia Chin. It is. Chin Holdings is my company. Sarah found her voice first. Julia, I don't understand. You own this building. I own 12 buildings actually. Riverside Towers is just one property in my portfolio. Ryan was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. That's impossible. You live in a studio apartment. You drive a Honda. You work. I work in real estate development. I have for the past 10 years. But you said you worked in property management. I do manage properties. My properties. Sarah was frantically flipping through papers in her folder. The lease. The lease says the building is owned by Chin Holdings. That's correct. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. You own our building. I do. For how long? 3 years. I bought it the month before you moved in. The timeline was clearly sinking in for both of them. Julia, Sarah said carefully, when we applied for the apartment, you were listed as a reference on our application. Because Ryan asked me to be a reference. I thought it was funny that he was asking his sister to vouch for him to rent an apartment from his sister. You let us move in knowing you owned the building? You qualified for the lease based on your income and credit history. I didn't give you any special treatment. Ryan was processing this information slowly. The rent payments. We've been paying rent to you? To Chin Holdings, which I own. The payments go through a management company, but yes, ultimately you've been paying rent to me. For 3 years. That's correct. Sarah looked devastated. Julia, why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked. You assumed I was struggling financially because I live simply and drive an older car. You never wondered how I could afford to live downtown, or why I seemed financially stable despite what you thought was a low-paying job. Ryan was staring at the conference table. The eviction notice is legitimate. You violated multiple terms of your lease agreement. But you're my sister. Which is why I gave you 3 years to figure out how to be a responsible tenant before enforcing the rules. Sarah spread the documents from her folder across the table. We brought evidence that we've been good tenants. Payment history, no complaints from neighbors. Actually, I said, opening my own portfolio, there have been several complaints from neighbors about your dog. Barking at night, messes in the hallway, and aggressive behavior toward other residents' children. I slid a stack of complaint forms across the table. And these are photos of the unauthorized modifications you made to your bathroom. More photos followed, before and after shots of their bathroom renovation. These renovations required approval from building management and a deposit for potential damage. You did neither. Sarah was reading through the complaint forms, her face getting paler with each page. Mrs. Williams, I continued, the lease clearly states that any permanent modifications require written approval and that all pets must be registered within 30 days of arrival. We didn't think a shower head counted as a permanent modification, Ryan said weakly. You installed new plumbing fixtures and tiles. You changed the electrical configuration for mood lighting. These are significant alterations that affect the property value. Julia will fix everything. We'll register Max, we'll pay whatever fees you want, we'll change the bathroom back. Mr. Williams, the issue isn't whether you can fix the violations now. The issue is that you disregarded the lease terms for months and only want to comply now that you're facing consequences. Ryan's composure finally cracked. Julia, I'm your brother. You can't evict me. I can't show favoritism to family members. That would be unfair to my other tenants who follow the rules. Other tenants? You have other tenants. I own 12 buildings, Ryan. I have over 300 residential units and 50 commercial spaces. You're one of 300 families I provide housing for. The scope of what he was learning seemed to overwhelm him. Julia, how is this possible? How do you own all this? I bought my first property 10 years ago with money I saved from my job in property management. I renovated it, increased its value, and used the equity to buy another property. I repeated that process until I had a portfolio large enough to generate significant income. But the studio apartment is exactly the right size for my needs. I don't require a lot of space, and living simply allows me to reinvest most of my income into additional properties. Sarah was crying now. Julia, we had no idea. If we had known. If you had known I was your landlord, you would have followed the lease terms? Well, yes. So you only follow rules when you think there might be consequences? The question hung in the air unanswered. Sarah, what happens to tenants in other buildings when they violate their leases? I don't know. They get evicted. Just like you're being evicted. Ryan found his voice again. Julia, what do you want from us? I want you to understand that actions have consequences, regardless of family relationships. Okay, we understand. Can we stay? No. The finality of my answer seemed to shock them both. But you're our family, Sarah protested. I'm also your landlord. And as your landlord, I have responsibilities to my other tenants to enforce lease agreements consistently. Ryan leaned forward desperately. Julia, where are we supposed to go? We can't afford anywhere else in this area. You'll need to find housing that fits your actual budget instead of stretching for a prestigious address you can't properly maintain. But Mom is supposed to move in next week. Which would have been another lease violation, since your lease specifies a maximum of 2 adult residents. The reality of their situation was clearly sinking in. Julia, Sarah said, is there anything we can do? Any way to work this out? I considered the question. There might be one option. Both of their faces lit up with hope. I have a 2-bedroom unit available in one of my other buildings. It's in a family-friendly neighborhood, pet-friendly, and about 30% less expensive than your current rent. Where? Ryan asked. The Maple Street complex. It's near the elementary school and has a playground. Ryan's face fell. Maple Street? That's not downtown. No, it's not. Julia, we can't move to Maple Street. That's where. That's not our demographic. What's your demographic, Ryan? People who've achieved a certain level of success. Professionals. People with standards. People who follow their lease agreements? He winced. Ryan, the Maple Street property has a community garden, a fitness center and covered parking. The units are larger than what you have now, and the rent would allow you to save money instead of living paycheck to paycheck. But the address. Would be honest about your actual financial situation instead of pretending to be something you're not. Sarah was looking at the photos I'd slid across the table. It does look nice, Julia. It is nice. And it would be appropriate for a family with an elderly parent and a pet. Ryan was still focused on the status implications. Julia, I can't tell people I live on Maple Street. Why not? Because it's not impressive. Impressive to whom? To colleagues, clients, friends. My address is part of my professional image. Ryan, your professional image should be based on your work performance, not your zip code. That's easy for you to say. You own half the city. I own 12 buildings. And I built that portfolio by living below my means and making smart financial decisions, not by stretching for prestigious addresses I couldn't afford. The conversation had clearly reached a crossroads. So what's it going to be? I asked. The Maple Street unit at a rent you can actually afford or finding something on your own within 30 days? Ryan and Sarah exchanged glances. Can we see the Maple Street unit? Sarah asked. Of course. Marcus can show it to you this afternoon. And if we take it, Ryan said reluctantly, what about the lease violations here? The eviction stands. But I won't pursue additional damages, and I'll provide a neutral reference for future rental applications. Ryan sighed heavily. I guess we don't have much choice. You always have choices, Ryan. The question is whether you're ready to make choices based on reality instead of image. After they left to tour the Maple Street property, Marcus joined me in the conference room. How do you think that went? Better than expected. I think they're actually considering the Maple Street unit. And if they don't take it, then they'll figure out their housing situation the same way everyone else does when they get evicted. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. The Maple Street apartment is really nice. Sarah loves the kitchen. Can we move in next weekend? I texted back. I'll have Marcus prepare the lease. His response came quickly. Thank you, Julia. I'm sorry about everything. I didn't understand what you'd built. You understand now? I'm starting to. Maybe you can teach me about real estate investing sometime. I smiled as I typed my response. I'd be happy to. But first lesson. Live below your means, not above them. Lesson learned. 6 months later, Ryan and Sarah were thriving in their Maple Street apartment. Mom had moved into their spare room and loved the community garden. Ryan had started asking me genuine questions about real estate and financial planning. The eviction notice had been the wake-up call they'd needed, forcing them to confront the difference between living successfully and living impressively. And I'd learned something too. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to enforce the same standards you'd apply to anyone else. Ryan never did find out that I also owned the building where he worked. Some lessons are better learned one at a time.